there's politics in it. Now, I gave a talk at some place and I said, if you take Zulu, isiZulu, isiXhosa, Sipende, all these wonderful languages, they are mutually, to a large extent, mutually intelligible. But they will tell you, we speak different languages, And at Indiana, we teach Zulu. And when we've brought a Zulu person, there's no problem. When we've brought a Xhosa person to teach it, the Zulu people say, oh, no, she doesn't speak it. She does, but they will say she doesn't because there's politics more than linguistics going on there. And then there's idiolect. Each of us, possess a unique way of speaking. We can talk about Akufu-Adonyan English, Rollins English, Nkrumah's English. Remember, Nkrumah's English was very different. You would think it was anytime he spoke, you would think he was from maybe East Africa. He adopted a Pan-African accent, which was unique to his language. So all those features that are unique to us, to individuals, they are idiolect, so that we can speak of, for example, Shakespeare's English, Chaucer's English, Ajikum's English. I see him looking at me. So, yes, we all have unique characteristics, for our languages. Now, an important part of language is how it interacts with the brain. We know the billions of cells that are in the brain. And what is interesting is that when we speak, the brain engages in multitasking. Those in neuroscience, neurophysiology, all the medical things, psycholinguists, neurolinguists, you know what I'm talking about. So language is taught what we call the brain centers, the frontal lobe. And so when there is any crisis there, if there is any damage to any of the parts of the language centers, either through stroke, for example, if you take ischemic stroke where blood clots prevent, blood from flowing to the brain, or if you take a plaque, all these affect the brain. And what that does is that it impairs the person's language. So our languages can be impaired, by stroke or by some neurological diseases. And there's the Wernicke's aphasia, which is called receptive or sensory or posterior aphasia, which I've said is caused by ischemic stroke, and it impairs the language comprehension. Language comprehension is impaired. Utterances may make no sense. We also have impairment in the ability to read and write. We can't repeat, words and sentences, especially anything that's longer than a word becomes a problem. And we may add words that don't mean anything to the sentences we say if we have Wernicke's aphasia. Now, and then of course we have Broca's aphasia. This may be caused by a stroke, but it affects a different part of the brain. And what is important here is that there is the inability to do a lot of things. Phonetically, you have problems talking. It will be marked by diminished output of spontaneous speech and the loss of functional words. You may not be, your content words may be there, all right. Your nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs may be there, but the grammatical or the functional words will be lost. So instead of saying he is coming, you may just say come. He may not be there. If we're lucky, will be there. So if it is just the main verb, and the ing may be lost. So, and then of course we have the dysarthria. Oh, I transcribed it. I still have the transcription there. Dysarthria here is a disease that's caused by, again, nerves to the brain and or weakened muscles, which is used for speech. Now, when that happens, you have motor dysfunction, which results in disrupted speech. The person's speech may be slurred. Now, language and the concept of idea. For the past couple of years, I've been struggling with it. What is idea? Well, what's an idea? And what role does language play in it? How are ideas conceptualized and implemented in our daily lives? And the data I've been looking at, what I've seen is that in Akan, which is the language I worked on most, idea may be conceived or interpreted as thought, brain, mind, wisdom, and integrity. So, I mean, all these are interpretations that one can have. Now, what I'm most interested in is language in social action. How do we use language, in performing various activities that we do? How do we use language, in law, language in medicine, language in commerce? Those are things I've been interested in. And how do we use language to apologize and to criticize, to compliment, and all that? Now, what we realize is that speech is not just a community of sounds. If speech was just a community of sounds, then for the word boy, I may say bo or a. Okay, but I say boy. It's said together. There are prosodies associated with it. Pitch, for example, let's take the English word yes. Okay, depending on how I say it, it can mean different things. Yes, yes, yes. I mean, when I say yes, I'm encouraging you to say something more, or you're saying something you don't think I'm paying attention, But if I say yes, I'm absolute, resolute in what I'm saying. The other example would be the one that I gave at my inaugural. I'm your teacher, aren't I? I'm not expecting you to say, yes, you are. But if I say, I'm your teacher, aren't I? Then obviously, I'm expecting you to acknowledge it, that I'm your teacher. I'm the speaker, aren't I? I'm the speaker, aren't I? Those phonetic pitch, what do you call it? The use of pitch, the use of loudness, all those are very important. And then, of course, language and institutional domains that I've mentioned. Now, I'm going to spend some time on this one, language and law. And oftentimes we talk about legal language. And then what is it? It deals with functions, characteristics, and vocabulary that are unique in judicial practice. And languages like Latin, German, French, Spanish, English have contributed to jurisprudence, the body of laws, and legal discourse in English language. The questions that we ask is, why do lawyers speak the way they do? Why do preachers, clergy, why do they speak the way they do? Why do physicians speak the way they do? And what is the impact of the language of lawyers on access to justice and society's jurisprudence? Now, important here is that distinct linguistic structures and how they relate to issues of interpretability and comprehensibility. How do you interpret this? How do you understand it? Language is very important in getting that done. A very simple thing would be, for example, if you look at legal documents, you may have state versus Kofi Mensah, and then Kofi Mensah versus the state. Now, the two are different. The front shifting of Kofi Mensah, if we take Kofi Mensah, okay, and then state versus Kofi Mensah versus state, we're kind of trying to emphasize who is bringing the case against whom. It's very important. And then, of course, pre-sequences, pre-announcements, pre-decision, pre-request. You find that in judicial discourse. If you've been to the court of law and you hear something like, cognizant of the fact that X, Y, and Z, whereas this, whereas that, whereas this, whereas that, wheretofore, okay? Now you are in a different place, and then also, what do you call them? The use of uppercase letters is very important. The use of capital letters. To demonstrate institutional authority, to disambiguate, and to draw attention to whatever is considered important in juridical discourse. Now, how about abbreviations? Those are also very important in legal discourse. So that if you see something like Mr. Griffiths /KO, the KO suggests that Mr. Griffiths is the contracting officer, a government official with the legal authority to enter a legal process into official records. So now how about esquire, ESQ, esquire? Traditionally the word esquire in England was used to refer to people who were a little above gentlemen, men who are above gentlemen, but below knighthood, So you are higher than a gentleman, but you are not a knight. These days it is used to, what they call, you put it at the full name of a jurist, to indicate that the person is a lawyer. So Esquire. Now, the question that we ask, in dealing with juridical discourses, how does legal language, its uniqueness, help make reality issues about the cause decision, cause power, offense committed, appropriacy of punishment? The language that is used, tells us about it. And so when you go to the courts, you're not just listening to, as linguists, we're not just listening to who wins the case, but we want to know how is language appropriated by the juries in the negotiation, if you like, of whatever case is being adjudicated. Now, language plays a very important role in how laws are made. So go to Congress, go to the Parliament. A bill is put forward, it goes through revisions, it goes to committees, it comes back, it goes to the president after the Congress or the Parliament has voted on it. And what you find is that the final product will be maybe totally different in terms of the language used than when it began. Now, also the nature of language used to describe or talk about alleged crime can also have significant legal repercussions and financial consequences for what do you call it, for the speaker. Now, here I want us to take one case and look at it. The state versus George Kofi Appianin. Now, George Kofi Appianin, a spraying mechanic, attacked the Minister of Agriculture, an Asante-born, listen to it carefully, an Asante-born at Jumapo Achim, near Koforidua, and resident of Esikesu in the Nsawam Magisterial District, was charged with murder, contrary to Section 46, Act 2960. The accused, George Kofi Appianin, while being arrested by a police officer, escort Corporal Chinleo, on January 25, 1967, hit the officer on the forehead with a hammer, wounding the officer. The officer was sent to Nsawam Hospital, where he later died on January 30, 1967. Now, the superintendent of police who filed the police report on behalf of the assistant commissioner wrote this, and I want us to pay attention to it. Name George Appianin. There is no Kofi. Name George Appianin, alias Nail. Now the question for me as a linguist, that's very important. Why is alias important here? Does it point to people with aliases committing crime? I don't know, but I want to know what it is. Why alias is important. Race Ashanti. Now we know that race, what do you call it, is based on physical traits and ethnicity and based on culture and stuff like that. But here it says race Asante. Birthplace, Jumapo Achim. Occupation, mechanic. Address, Care Minister of Agriculture, Asikesu. Age 28, height 5 feet 6 inches, complexion black, hair black, eyes big. Now, when I see eyes big, I say to myself, why did the police officer write that? And it took me to, someone growing up in the village, Neni Poche Poche, which is an indication that he's prone to crime. So the language that is used here is very important to me as a linguist. And then marks, one vaccination mark on left upper arm. Now, for people of my age and older, one thing that we know is that people were marked, such that you could tell by looking at someone's face where they came from. So this guy had no facial marks, but there was a mark which he said was due to vaccination. But as far as I'm concerned, the demographic information is very important in the judicial process, as far as the police is concerned or are concerned. Now here is the what do you call it? The subpoena which was sent to people to come and testify. I want us to look at it carefully because when it's off, I'll be talking about it. So look at the names of the people that were asked to come and testify. Look at the fact that it's their initials and their places of abode or their place of work. look at the fact that there's a date up there to the right, and there's another date at the bottom there. And I want you to see who signed it. E. Akufo-Addo, former President Akufo-Addo's father, who was the Attorney General at the time. All right. And then if you look at it, it says, you are hereby commanded. For those of us in linguistics, the word command is what? It's a performative verb. It gives you no option. You have to come or else you're in trouble. So let's look at it. So what you see here, the High Court, Accra, appears before the title, subpoena at test at criminal sessions. Okay, it shows the power of the court. You know, you bring the power of the court first by saying it's a High Court. Now the title is written in uppercase letters. It's also of legal import. Now ad test is Latin ad testificandum, which means you're compelled to come and testify, failure of which constitutes a contempt of court and punishable by law. Now, the state versus George Kofi Apiani, here the defendant's name is written in uppercase letters to draw attention and for disambiguation. It is George Kofi Apiani that we are referring to and nobody else. Now, all 10 witnesses have their names written in capital after uppercase letters, but then only their initials and places of abode are given. If you're asking someone to come and testify in the case of murder or in a murder case, you want to hide their identity for their own safety. Thank you. Now, the syntactic structures here, a bit of linguistics here, you know, you have, what do you call it? It is a noun phrase plus a prepositional phrase. You know, we call it a noun phrase because the main element in it is a noun. And for a prepositional phrase, the main word in it is a preposition. So the NP is the witness's initial or police CID number. Okay, so we have number 506 GC/2KA. The prepositional phrase is the preposition also plus a noun phrase. Here you have the preposition of, and then the NP, which is the witness's place of work or abode. Esikesu, Akwetia, or Nsumam. So you have things like AA of Esikesu or D/INSP, this is Inspector, I believe, EA of Nsawam. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that all these are very important. The way the names of people are written is important. These are not done haphazardly. You know, in a legal document, accuracy is required. And this is what this person has done here. Now, the salutation says what? Greetings. Now, when someone says greetings, it is a pre-sequence. You know something else is coming. Don't just say greeting and stop. Something is, I mean, there's an, what do you call it? Something impending, if I should use that word. You know, so it says greetings, written in uppercase letters. This was pragmatically, there's a pre-announcement, you know, or a pre-command. In this case, the person is going to give a command and suggest that an announcement is imminent. The entire text of the message following the salutation is one sentence only. Brevity is important. Conciseness is important in, you know, the language of law. You don't want to resort to circumlocution. You know, crispness, lucidity, very essential here. And so he says, you are hereby commanded. Now, the place where the case will be held is the propositional phrase, to be holden at, meaning to be adjudged, to be decided, or to be decreed. The expression in the forenoon, you know, it's in reference to the early part of the day, and then with the noon. So here the person is saying, don't confuse the time with the evening time. It's the morning time I'm referring to. And the duration of time of appearance before the court to testify is represented by the stretch. Oops. It's meant by the stretch. And so from day to day during the said criminal session until the above cause is tried. Okay? It means it's not a single day. Now, the Chief Justice of Ghana, Edward Akufo-Addo, commits the subpoenaed witnesses to the term or the duration of the trial. Now, the reason for the witnesses' appearance to give evidence on behalf of the prosecution, the word cause is an expression which means until the above, in the expression until the above cause is tried, is from Latin, causa. okay? And it means the case or the proceeding. One might also say course of action for legal theory of the case. Now, placement of the date of the subpoena's issuance after the legal office of the person that's the Chief Justice issuing the subpoena is for clarity and emphasis. Don't confuse the date. I take it as important. So I've said it first, I'm saying it last. In effect, what we're saying is that language is very important in legal interpretation, in access to justice, writing legal briefs and stuff like that. Now, let's talk about language and politics. Since 1997, I've been writing about this area. I love it. And, one of the things that for me intrigues me is how political actors talk. I prefer to call them actors because I view the world as a theater of chaos. And these actors insert themselves onto the arena with each actor causing one form of chaos or the other, some causing more chaos than others. In fact, when I gave a talk, I believe it was at Yale, and I called them, what they called actors. There was a gentleman who said, why do you call them actors? I said, well, that's how I see them. That's how I see them. Anyhow, so in political discourse studies, one thing is that it is cross-disciplinary. It cuts through linguistics, anthropology, sociology, political science, law, communication studies, etc. Now, and in political discourse studies, we study how political actors and political commentators use language to talk about politics and how politics informs language. The use of language in social-political conflicts, especially, I'm interested in the language of war. If you paid attention to, the Israeli-Hamas war, and you see how Netanyahu and the Hamas leaders, were proctoring the war, it was very interesting, how language was used. And in the Iraq war, the second one, the use of religion in the prosecution of war was also very, very common on both sides, the American side and the Iraqi side. We look at the speeches of politicians, party propaganda, slogans. I'm not going to say all of it. Now, I'm also interested in language and liberty within the political domains. And I'm encouraging my fellow linguists to also look at it because there's so much that goes on in it. Rhetoric is the most studied feature of politics. And the work of Aristotle has been the most that is debated. That is debated the most. Now, political interviewing, I don't know whether you've watched this, if political artists are being interviewed, journalists ask questionable questions. And questionable questions are not answerable. And so to answer them, they have to resort to indirectness. Evasion is very important. Hedging is very important. We also have the question of answerability is very, very important. And then the question of truth in politics. Should political actors tell the truth? What is truth? And should they tell it? Tomorrow when I talk about language and politics in political language and liberty in political discourse, I shall return to this. Now, political pronouns, how political actors speak the unspeakable. There are things that must not be spoken, but they have to, especially if they are put on the hotspot. How do they speak it? All those are very important here. Then political ads. Now, how about language and religion? I'm going to spend some time on this one. The work of David Crystal stands out. He's looked at the language of liturgy, of sermons, of hymns, and what he saw was that in the English language, each of these rituals, possess unique linguistic characteristics. Especially he being a phonologist, he talks about pitch, loudness, pausology. The use of pausing, different kinds of pausing. If you've been to African American church, you hear say it all. Oh yes. Those back channels, those side sequences, all those are very important in religious discourse. And then, of course, different types of prayers. Now, biblical reading. How do you read it? How is the Bible read? It has to be read in such a way that there's that kind of spirituality that's attached to it. Let's say, when Paul was asked to defend himself before Agrippa, and I have some of it in my head, knowing you to be knowledgeable about Jewish customs I'm happy that it's before you that I'm to give my defense. My manner of life has been spent as a Pharisee. I am a Pharisee. So you can imagine Paul defending himself and the kind of language. How does he say it? How does he make his story tellable? So tellability is very important. You won't find tellability in the dictionary. Linguists, we create our own words. So these are very important when it comes to the language of religion, sermonic discourse. Now, one area of religion, the intersection of language and religion, is xenoglossia and glossolalia. On the day of Pentecost, when all these guys were gathered, 9 o'clock in the morning, something came upon them. The Holy Spirit came upon them, and they began to speak in languages that they had not studied. That was different. They spoke human languages. Some of them spoke the language of Persia, Iran, Iraq. Some spoke the language of Syrian, Libya, Misrim, Egypt. So people heard their languages being spoken by these people, and they said, these guys must be drunk. What is happening? And then Peter got up and said, no. It's only 9 o'clock. We're not drunk. We are fulfilling the prophecy of Joel. So what you find here is xenoglossia. You're speaking a language you've not studied. And then there is glossolalia, which is unintelligible babbling. You may hear things like shibi lapa, kibi lapa, shenke lapa. If I don't know whether you've studied it, and what you find is that in Christian Pentecostal, in fact, a colleague of mine who was a mentor, he taught at Toronto, but he was my mentor, he studied it. He himself is a Pentecostal, and in 73, he did a paper on it. 72, he did a paper on it. And what he found was that it wasn't human language. It was based on the glossolalis, native tongue, so that if I'm an Akan, I'm speaking glossolalia, the sounds will come from Akan. They won't come from any other language. And they have what they call, it's a simpler form, it's reduced form. If, for example, there's consonant, vowel, consonant, I may just do consonant, vowel, or I may just do a vowel. So there is that kind of difference in terms of the phonemes. Everything is simple, and it is not human language. Now, the rhythm and intonation. And quite recently, Dr. Furi and I did a paper on glossolalia. We studied glossolalia in the Ghanaian, Christian churches. Or what they call churches. And what we found was phenomenal. The pitch, loudness, tempo, all the prosodic features I'm talking about, they're there. However, like what William Samarin found, it's not human language. And if you ask the glossolalist afterwards, what did you say? They said, I don't know. Now, researchers at UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, did they attached electrodes to the brain to see what was happening. And what they found was that it wasn't coming from the language centers. It was coming from the social and emotional part of the brain. And what it means, therefore, is that it helps everyone. Everyone gets something from it. The glossolalists are saying, see, we told you, it's not human language, it's angelic. And then the linguists and the neuro people are saying, well, you know what, it's not language. So it's very interesting how language and religion intersect. Now, one area of language and religion is the language of religious wars. And here, for the sake of time, I'm going to read this cap, and then most importantly, what I'm going to say is what Pope Urban said in 1095. Now, what we find in most churches, those people in leadership positions, when they are in trouble, they start a war, or they do something very funny. So Pope Urban was in trouble. Nobody wants to talk about it, so I won't. But this is what he said, and let me read it. That those who've been accustomed unjustly to wage private warfare against the faithful now go against the infidels and end with victory. This war, which should have been begun long ago. That those who for a long time, having been robbers, now become knights. That those who have been fighting against their brothers and relatives, now fight in the proper way against the barbarians. That those who've been serving as mercenaries for small pay now obtain the eternal reward. That those who've been wearing themselves out in both body and soul now work for double honor. Behold, on this side will be the sorrowful and poor. On that, the rich. On this side, the enemies of the Lord. On that, his friends. Those who do not put off the journey, but rent their lands and collect money for their expenses. And as soon as winter is over and spring comes, let them eagerly set out on the way with God as their guide. And church, you say amen. All right, so we look at what's happening here. There's the use of antithesis or contrastive pairs. And on the one side of it, he talks about the good intentions of the crusade and crusaders, the noble benefits of the war. And then the other one, the bad and evil intentions of their Muslim enemies and the Muslims' impending punishment. The antithetic vocabulary used are faithful versus infidel, robbers versus knights. The constructions, brothers and relatives versus barbarians. Small pay, eternal rewards. Wearing out in body and soul, work for double honor. Sorrowful and poor, the rich. The enemies of the Lord, his friends. So there's the use of glittering generalities. These are words these are noble words, words that shine, words that say good things. And so these, you have words like faithful, nice, brothers and relatives, and others. Now let's look at the language and medicine. Now here what we see is that languages like Greek, Latin, Arabic, English, Ga, and Sinhalese have impacted the language of medicine. If you look at Hippocrates, of course, his writings contain words like catarrh, diarrhea, pedagogia. Latin, the work of the Roman aristocrat, Aulus Cornelius Celsus. His work, De Medicina, contains, borrowings from what they call Latin. And then Arabic, for example, gave us the word nuka. Contemporary medical English, we have words like bypass, clearance, base access, screening. Ga gave us kwashiorkor. Sinhalese gave us beriberi. Now, most important here is the medical, in terms of medical discourses, what it encapsulates, and more especially its impact on medical practice. That's very important. The interviews that when you go to the clinic, when your doctor talks, your doctor talks to you, together with the clinical reasoning, they're going to base their diagnosis on what you tell them. So what you tell them is very important in their interaction with you. And one thing I've also said here is the linguistic and communicative barriers, to physician-patient interaction. Can you imagine, when I went to see my physician, some time ago, I was given a form to fill. They said I should tell them my level of pain. And it was from 1 to 10. So I asked the doctor, what do you mean by level of pain? When I talk about my level of pain, I use reduplication. And now you're saying I should give numerical values. I said, okay, well, just write 5. It's difficult for me to, do it. Anyway, now in Ghana, the healing centers, the shrines, the churches, the language that is used there. Now, clinical training. And this is very important. When doctors train, are they taught, at least one Ghanaian language? Can you imagine, for example, someone comes to you and says, the sore I have, there's an abscess and the pain is considerable. But how are you going to say that? It's difficult, isn't it? Especially the person doing the interview and doing the translation. It's a problem, So my colleagues, Doku Ajakum and Osam, have done some work on that. Then there's also some work I did on valency in the articulation on management of bad news. How do you tell somebody they have cancer? Do you just go and say, you have cancer? They'll look at you and say, is this guy mad or what? You know, you have to find a way to tell the person. How do you make that tellable? You know, because this tellability is important because it can make or break the way you tell the patient. You know, and then of course, well, the translation, as I've talked about, can be difficult. Now, language and education, oh dear. Here I'll just say a few things because it's most importantly, who determines what is taught, how it is taught, and at what level. And not just that, you know, sub-Saharan Africa, we are highly multilingual. Take a country like Ghana, we are a very tiny country. We have 44 distinct ethno-linguistic groups and languages. And we know that sometimes, you know, some people complain about it. I mean, I have my own views on it. I don't think it's a problem at all. But multilingualism, research has shown, helps with cognitive development. And so we shouldn't not see it as a problem. But the most important thing is that we've taken European languages and used them as gatekeepers. I remember I went to a bush school, a village school, Assume Secondary School. And then from there, I went to Winneba. You know, Assume Secondary School, there were what, 70, whatever of us, only 3 of us qualified to go to sixth form because of English. The rest couldn't go. Can you imagine that? That's a travesty of justice. That's an intrusion on their educational liberty to use a language they don't speak to examine their minute. I remember in agricultural science, we were supposed to cut onion and draw the cross section. We didn't know. I raised my hand and I asked the teacher, what is cross section? No, I did that. There was a policeman there. I said, can I ask a question? And I asked the teacher, what's cross? The teacher didn't know. So if the teacher doesn't know, how can I know? No, this, I mean, it was painful. And I wrote in, I mean, I don't know what the exams council throws these things away. I wrote, we didn't know what cross section is. You know? Anyway, I mean, English language and also the issue of attrition. In fact, I've been working on, you know, endangered languages, and there's a language I'm working on with a colleague at Legon, Esther, and the language is called Dompo. And there are only 3 speakers left. 92, 87, 88 now, and 78. The language is dying, and we have to document it. Now, the people have been demographically submerged by the Nafara people, you know, and so gradually, I mean, the Guan languages of Ghana are dying. And the death of a language marks the death of a culture, the death of their medicine, of their philosophy. Anyway, now I think using English, you know, as the official language is wrong. In fact, in one of my writings, I've suggested Akwapim Chi. I didn't say I can. I didn't say Asante. I know the problems that one can run into. And for Nigeria, I've suggested Yoruba. And I remember when I gave a talk and I said Yoruba after the talk, an Igbo man came to me and said, you are the only person who can say this. Anyhow. All right. Now, the United Nations, you know, talks about, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You know, they talk about protection of individuals from language discrimination and guaranteeing minorities the right to use their own languages. Those are very important. Now, Ghana's educational policy, Nigeria's educational language policy in education, I've described that as what do you call it, a goat-lab fight. Goat, G-O-A-T. One of the things I did as a kid was I was a herder. I herded goats and sheep. And when you look at goats and they are fighting, you know, take sheep, for example, when they are fighting for mating rights, they come and hit each other. But when goats are fighting, they go over there, one goes over there, one goes over there, and they touch gently and go back. They want to be alive, you know? And that's exactly what African governments have done. They've done nothing. You think they're doing something, but they're doing nothing. They're afraid. Anyway, the Tanzanian case is sad because, you know, Julius Nyerere did very well. Swahili was used, and Tanzania was the most literate country in Africa. And in 1992, they made a U-turn and decided to go for English, and everything has gone down. In fact, when they were making the U-turn, they blamed everything on Swahili, you know, but then nothing has gone right since then. Anyway, language and commerce here. Consider what can happen if there was no language. Everything will come to a halt at Mokola, Kotokraba, Kejetia. Nothing will happen without language. Okay, in modern commercial activities, we have Facebook. What do you call it? These days, nobody goes to the shops anymore in the US. You know, all the shops are dying because all you have to do is to go online and order, and the thing is brought to you. Who wants to go to the shops to get shot? You know, and then of course we know that there's negotiation, and the women are very good at it. You know, when I go, for example, Mikun, you know, so first the greeting is my husband, and if she says I'm her husband, why wouldn't I buy from her? They know how to sell. The language of negotiation is very important. Now, they will tell you, well, I bought this at 14 cedis, you know, but because of you, I will give it to you at 10 and sell at a loss. Okay. And one thing in 1989, you know, my students and I at Legon, you know, what we did was to go on the buses. You know, and when you went on the buses, there were people that sold medications. I don't know whether they still do it. They will come on the bus and sell. And we pulled one guy aside, and this is what he said: all traders lie. You know, so language and gender, one area in which you know, language has you know, been used, what do you call it? That we find the use of language, especially in this all the various intricacies that goes with it, is when we're dealing with gender, issues of gender. I've given the Kadi course, the carnative course, the mood course, and the village course among the Huli, and the Israeli legal is certain. All that I'm saying here is that in all these places, the women know how to use language and they win. The men don't know how to use language and they lose. You know, in the Akan areas, for example, you know, there are sub-issues that come up, especially if a man has spoken arrogantly, you know, they are fined, they speak arrogantly again, they are fined again, and it never stops. And I'm like, well, can't you see that all your money is going away? You know, but what colleagues who have worked on some of these, what they say, especially, I don't know whether you've seen this book, You Just Don't Understand, by Deborah Tannen. It's classic. And she talks about the fact that men and women use the language for different purposes. Women are more interested in networks. They want to keep the peace. You know, men are interested in status and so-called assertiveness. And, you know, one thing that we will see this when we talk about liberty. Men talk more than women, but as soon as a woman opens the mouth to talk, he talks too much. You don't even give them the chance to talk. Anyway, the way we live impacts the way we speak. It's very easy. I mean, take the US, for example. You know, those on the East Coast speak differently than those on the South or the Midwest, you know, and there are prejudices and stereotypes associated with it. Those from the South, for example, people laugh at their English, but their English is the British English of the 16th and 17th century. But, you know, despite the fact that people laugh at their English, they say they are sincere. Those on the East Coast, nobody talks about them being sincere. And if you don't believe it, look at who the political actors they are. I won't say more, I'll be in trouble. All right. Now, so here what I'm saying is that the place you live impacts the way you speak. Take the word umbrella. We call it akatewia in P, that which protects you from the sun. You know, we have too much of it. But, you know, you go to the temperate climates and they can't have enough sun. So they sing about, you are my sunshine. I won't sing my sunshine. I know it's a proverb, but I've had too much of sunshine. Anyhow, the point I'm making here is, you know, where you live, the flora and fauna, the zoology, the geomorphology, the climatology, all these impact our names. Our names are impacted by the geomorphology, the climatology, and all that. And then, of course, your profession also impacts the way you talk. Now, we know, for example, that professional drivers, especially taxi cab drivers and fisher folk, their language is a little obscene than the rest of us. You know, How about lay drug medicine men? We've said it already. They kind of lie a little bit. And then you take judicial discourse, medical discourse, and you see that there is, some distinction there, differences in distinctiveness, rather, in language usage. And then also language used in the enactment of power. And the indigenous Ghanaian setting, the orators, credited with good language. The Achame, they are credited. In Ghanaian English, we call them linguists. I'm very jealous when they say that because we don't see them as linguists. We want to appropriate the term for ourselves, linguists. So I call them orators or editors. Okay. I'm going to, now I want to talk about liberty. As humans, we call ourselves Homo sapiens. We are the wise one. Homo loquiens. We are the people, the species with language. Homo grammaticus. We are the people who have grammar. We are grammarians. And to that I'm adding Homo libertas. We are born free. Humans are born free. And if we are, then, one thing is clear. My work on language and liberty draws from African axioms and the work of the English philosopher Isaiah Berlin. Berlin talks about two kinds of liberty: positive liberty, negative liberty, and positive liberty. Negative liberty, which he calls freedom from, and positive liberty, freedom to. We want to be free from intrusions as humans. I don't want, in Chi we say, we don't want anybody to oppress us like they would of animals or goats. No. And then we also want to have the freedom to do things, our own free will, within, of course, moral values and moral value systems and stuff like that. So the principle emphasizes language being indispensable in humans' pursuit of freedom from oppression and the will to take part in their own communal activities. Now, I'm going to skip some of these. The most important here is that it is grounded in different informal and institutional domains. Now, in the theory, what I emphasize is that I take it as axiomatic that it is interactive categories which should form the basis of every single analytical claim. Whatever we say must be based on what people actually say, not from our linguistic judgments. In any case, as linguists, once you become a linguist, you don't become a good speaker of your language anymore. These are not my words. This is from Antilla. Linguists have very funny take on language. If that wasn't the case, would we say colorless green ideas slip furiously? If the thing is colorless, how can it be green? Here I'm talking about semantic anomaly and stuff like that. Anyhow, the principle calls for language ideologies, usage, and notions of linguistic appropriacy in issues of understandability, interpretability, to be analyzed carefully in order to state correctly the extent to which they impact and are impacted by liberty. Language and liberty, here are the characteristics of the principle. Both language and liberty are rooted in human cognitive experience and are concretized in human social practice. I've said that language is innate, just as liberty is also innate. So the innateness, joins them together. As humans, we're born with language, and we're also born with liberty. And so that when we feel oppressed, the tendency is for us to use language to free ourselves from the oppression. Sometimes we are successful. Different cultures have different ways of doing it. In some societies, they resort to silence. In other societies, people talk. In Ghana, we talk, we march, we protest, fix the nation. All those are very important. What they're saying is that something is wrong. That has to be corrected. And I tip my hat to those who organize those things. Yes, the presidency, whoever may descend on them, but what they're doing is important for the restoration of liberty. Now, in talking about liberty, I see it as a cognitive construct, a philosophical construct, a political construct, a moral construct, legal construct, economic, health, it is perfect, and it is universal. We'll come to this, so I'm not going to go over all this now. Now, liberty in the political process. Here, what I'm referring to here is freedom to justly influence governmental policies. We should have the freedom to do that. Freedom to compete for leadership positions, freedom to be part of and participate in the politics theater, bearing in mind that such rights are a matter of morality. That's the common good. I'm borrowing that word from J.B. Danquah. And positive law. Laws being defined as the area in which individuals can consider themselves as what? Free agents. Humans must have the free will to compete, autonomously in deciding for themselves despite external restraints. And we must also be ready to bear the consequences of our decisions. Those are very important. No matter one's political thought or affiliation, denial of or intrusion on one's political liberty is unacceptable and is condemnable. Liberty must be seen in our electoral process, cognizant of the fact that its denial often leads to disenfranchisement and political instability. If you oppress people for too long, something's going to happen. So I've put forward some recommendations here, make people aware that they have political liberty, which gives them free and active participation in the electoral process. Have constitutional amendments that eliminate threats to individual political liberty. Have legislative instruments in place to protect and maintain political and legal liberty. Here I'm borrowing from Professor Datiba. Make certain that the Electoral Commission of Ghana, for example, works in concert with the executive branch of government and the political parties to enforce the laws on political liberty justly. Make political liberty available to the judiciary to enable it to decide the constitutionality of laws guiding the electoral process freely and justly. I'm repeating those words, freely and justly. Consolidate and strengthen political liberty to make it withstand any political and electoral challenges and ensure that political liberty given by law is enjoyed by all, else it becomes a privilege. Now, here I talk about law being fundamental. Van Leer, Professor Justice Van Leer, the person who first gave the Danquah Memorial Lectures, who was the first to give it. I read his work. I like it a lot. And he talks a lot about, the normativity, for example, of a nation's existence, the fact that law is normative, the fact that, without law, there's a problem. And also the fact that unlike the laws of nature, take gravity, for example, if you jump, you won't stay up, you'll come down. I don't know, unless maybe you were somebody else, they are not violable, but human laws must be violable. Because there has to be costs and rewards, say that if people break it, they know they're going to be penalized for it. And anyone in authority, who exceeds his power and uses force is no longer a magistrate or a justice of peace. I'm quoting from John Locke. The power of law this is very important, the power of law to punish violators places a considerable burden on lawmakers, to make laws that do not target a section of the population viewed by the majority as lawless or nonconformists. It's all too easy to say, well, these people are not behaving like human beings, they're behaving like animals. Let's put them in jail. And if anybody who speaks in favor of them, let's put that person also in jail. It's all too easy to do that. The power of law, okay, as John Locke rightly says, wheresoever law ends, tyranny begins. And I think I want us to take cognizance of that. Besides laws directing humans in relation to good and evil in the private lives, as well as in the political, consensus political process, it's important that laws must also do what? Govern free acts and be about human happiness and or the welfare of the state. The judiciary's power to interpret and define the true meaning and operation of law must be ensured. Give the judiciary a free hand to do what they are trained to do. And what, as Van Leer said, the burden and responsibility to interpret the laws must be based on law, evidence, judicial precedent, and common sense. There must be no impartiality here. And again, I'm going to skip most of these. I like what Petit says here and what Rousseau also says. Rousseau says that he saw inequality as intruding on liberty, although I have to say I don't support Rousseau's work, especially on positive liberty, because of what happened with it. I mean, people like Stalin, and also Mussolini. And the extent to which it impacted what they call the people at the time, you understand this more. Now, here is something that I'm not going to read it. It's long, and I don't think I have a lot of time. But yes, there's a précis of what do you call it, Article Ghana's Constitution, Article 14. And if you read it, basically what it's saying is that, holding a suspect for more than, I think I will read it because of something that is there. No one can be put in prison or have their freedom taken away unless they've been sentenced to a jail sentence, are suspected of having committed a crime, or it would be in the interest of public, be in the interest of public health. I'm sorry. I have bad eyes. Public health or safety to detain the person. The liberty of a child may be limited for the purpose of providing the child with education or for the welfare of the child. No one can be arrested without being told in a language they understand the reasons why they are being arrested and being informed of that, of the fact that they have a right to a lawyer of their choice. Anyone who is arrested or detained must be brought before a court within 2 days. I think I can even end there. Now, this is very important because of a case, Awayevu versus the Republic, in which Awayevu, was kept in jail for 5 years, without bail, and the case had not been heard. 5 years in jail. And so in the end, the Supreme Court decided, you can't keep him there forever. He has to be freed. And I applaud the Supreme Court for doing that because it made the law itself unconstitutional. Well, here we also talk about Ghana's 1992 Constitution, where it talks about personal liberties, personal freedom. Of importance is the fact that in Ghana, no one is above the law. And I think as Ghanaians, we should hold that to be true and enforce it. No one is above the law. And any acts or bills or executive actions that place any above the law subjects or forces others to injustice. Therefore, the fight for legal liberty must require a concerted effort on the part of those fighting for it to come together as a team, stay informed, step up, move forward in strength, what do you call it? Starting to see some of these things, and stay in unity. Staying on the sidelines will make the fight unwinnable. Oh yes, you have to be involved in it. Now let me go to the next one. We must not overlook or underfund. Underfunding, we must not overlook or underfund and or under-resourced, the wheels that make the fight move and succeed. We must ensure that members of the legislature restrain themselves from passing biased bills. And if such biased bills are passed, the judiciary judiciously examines them and interprets them with attention to the text of the law, precedent, and intention of the framers of the Constitution. I mean, again, those of you in law, I'm not qualified enough to talk about it. I'm talking about originalism and the textualists. So how are you going to interpret it? Are you going to try to get into the history of the brain of those who framed it, the Constitution, and how they would have thought about it, or do you interpret the text as you see it? Precedent is very important when you're doing these things. Now, let me talk about social liberty. Social liberty entails the nature and limits of the power which can be legitimately exercised by society over an individual. If society exerts too much power, that's wrong. To obtain social liberty, it is imperative that authority be held at the pleasure of the ruled. So if we vote somebody to the presidency, that person must understand that he is there because of us. It should be to us, and not to himself or herself. There has to be statutory checks. That take the limits of the power of governments. Other than that, we end up in tyranny. All right. Then I will say this and move on. Infringing on the social liberty of the governed is viewed as a breach of duty. If you infringe on the social liberty of the governed, it's a breach of duty. It makes you unqualified to become president or whatever. All right. In gender, language, language, gender, and liberty, here, I'm going to re-emphasize the fact that men and women speak differently. When it comes to quantitative speech dominance, men speak more than women in public. But then, we call women, we say they are talkatives wrongly, and sometimes it's used against them. And in Guinea, not just in Guinea, you find it all over the place. There's a portion of women say that they're not even given space to talk. Among the Khan of Ghana, we use epigrams. About madam. Well, the man should buy his own gun and keep it. About madam means when a woman buys a gun, the man keeps it. And I'm saying, well, why should the man keep it? If the man wants to keep a gun, he should buy his own gun. I'm speaking literally here. But the point I want to say here is that these epigrams are used to subordinate women, and it doesn't make sense. Now, women who are assertive, and stand up to men, they are called Obakokoni, a woman rooster, or a woman cockerel, which means the person is loud and arrogant. We don't want women to speak, let alone even, speak their minds. Such a label, as I'm saying, intrudes on the liberty of women. On health, we know what the WHO has said, what our organization has said, and what we see is that, there's violation of women's liberty when it comes to reproductive health. And my own work, in Ghana is that disease and society's dominant actors intrude on the liberty of people who are sick. For example, I saw a woman I had known for so many years chained to an orange tree because she was sick upstairs. And I asked, why have you done that to her? They said, oh, she will do this and that. And so I said, okay, let's take the chain off. Let's put you in it. And then let's see. He said, Master, I say, sir, do you want us to do it? I said, yes. So we did it. And I said, let's go. Let's leave him there. And they said, hey, Mujameho, are you leaving me behind? I said, but you have changed the woman. What is good for the goose is good for the gander. Yeah, when it comes to healthcare, again, translation is a problem, as I've already mentioned. And, something has to be done about it. I mean, you know of the Salem trials, the witch trials that were done in Salem. You know the test. You were asked to recite the Lord's Prayer, and if you couldn't do it, it means you were a witch. And then the other one was the third nipple. If you had a mole, you were considered a witch. Can you imagine? Now, here in Ghana, when I taught at Legon, a gentleman came to my office and said, Dr. Bing, Mina Nabia, I can't see a bien. Now, what's this one sick a bien and I would tell the Nipanam Kese? What this person is saying is that my grandmother has only 2 teeth left, and they say that when they have only 2 teeth left, that's when they can kill and eat. I said, get out of my office. When she had all the teeth, she didn't kill and eat. And now she had only 2. Instead of helping her, look at what you're doing to her. Now we know what happens with Trokosi and all those places. I don't have to tell you, you know about them already. Now the point I'm saying here is that when it comes to health, liberty, take polygamy, for example. Take polygamy, Oh, well, I've talked with people and they say, oh no, my culture allows me, my religion allows me. Now, so you don't understand what your religion says. Now, I know this is a touching topic, it touches a lot of nerves here, but consider it. For me, it's a health issue. I saw my mom live through it. It's a health issue. And it has to be addressed. We shouldn't pretend that it's not there. If polygamy is good, then we should encourage polyandry. Now, some people are going to say this guy is a lunatic. If men can marry more than one, then women should be allowed to marry more than one. What's wrong with that? If we don't want it, then we must not do it. It's a half issue. That's the way I see it. Don't tell me your culture allows it. Culture doesn't stay at the same place. Culture changes. When I was growing up, I saw some men wear the loincloth on board Danta. And I lived with Krobos and Ningos, and during the depot, there was the beads and the loincloth and the beads all around, and they were saying, and as kids, we watched it. We pretended we were not looking, we were. Now they don't do that anymore. Now they have a rap, things have changed. Culture does not stay at the same place. So my argument is, it's time to stop polygamy. Parliament should pass a bill stopping it. I think that's more even dangerous than whatever they're passing now. Polygamy should be looked at and it should be abolished. I'll put men in jail for it. If not, let's allow polyandry. I don't know. Anyhow, ethical liberty, liberty intersects with ethics, the moral values and ideologies and social imperatives that guide individuals' behaviors and stuff like that. Now, I'm not going to read all of it. The main point that I'm trying to say here is that, our desire to act as we wish must be coterminous with our desire to act justly and ethically. It's important. We should act justly and ethically. I look at the case where, what do you call it? During coup d'etats and uprisings, we violate our constitutions. We violate the ethics. Our societal ethics, we violate them. Take the 62 and where I tell you Adam Afio Akweje and Mr. Kofi Crab, were charged with assassination, attempt, a plot to kill President Nkrumah. And in that case, you saw the intersection of law, ethics, and politics, and what happened basically is that these gentlemen were acquitted. And when they were acquitted, the executive wasn't happy. So immediately they were rearrested. The president appointed a new judge and stuff like that. And the people were sentenced to death. They were in jail until they were later released. So you can imagine, where is the ethics here? How about the house cleaning exercise that was carried out by the AFRC? Those days, in 79, we all went to town, let the blood flow, let the blood. Whose blood? You know, if you come to think about it, there was a crisis there. Individuals' legal, ethical, personal liberties, were intruded upon. I hold it as abhorrent and abominable. Such war cries as let the blood flow or I don't know whether you guys remember it, but women were stripped naked and men were happy, were jumping. I mean, can you imagine if it was your mother? As a society, we were blind to the victim's plight and concerns, and it was a flouting of our own ethical liberty and truth. We ask ourselves, does truth matter at all in politics? In political discourse, one of the things that we say is that hearsay is evidentiary. Hearsay is evidentiary. That will not hold in a court of law. But in political discourse, hearsay is considered evidentiary. I remember President Bush saying, since when did terrorists tell us they were coming to attack us? So we have to base everything on hearsay, on what the security agencies tell us. And sometimes they get it wrong. They got it wrong during the Iraq War. Saddam Hussein had nothing. It doesn't mean he was a good man. Anyhow, so the use of falsehood through libel and slander about a person, it damages the person's reputation and character, and consequently violates their liberty. So here, what I'm saying here is the use of falsehood in our polity. We find it all the time, and there are some of these talk shows, that people, in the US is very common. You can see that what they're saying is false, and yet they say it. So I will end with truth and liberty. What I say is that to have truth and the law on one side is to be guaranteed liberty from oppressive forces and to have the freedom to do as one wills. Liberty and religion. Here, the most important thing that I want to emphasize here is that, religious liberty deals with the right to free exercise of religion. Note that it gives individuals the power to choose what to believe in or what not to believe in and enjoy social life like everyone else. Any denial of the benefits of religious liberty is a denunciation of one's social being. Now, religious liberty also ensures there's a general freedom for all. And the Guinean Constitution says all persons shall have the right to freedom, the right to freedom to practice in a religion and to, what do you call it? I can't even read. I start cheering. The Guinean Constitution does not, this is very important, the Guinean Constitution does not state that religion or faith is a good thing or a bad thing. It's good that it doesn't do that. The Constitution does not indicate that the state should advance or inhibit any religion. If the state starts or begins to advance religion, there's a problem. Religious liberty neither establishes a secular public moral order nor constitutes a nation, so that it is wrong, for example, to call Ghana a Christian nation. It's wrong to do that. I'm a Christian, by the way, I'm not shy about it. I teach Sunday school and I preach also in the US, but I think it is wrong, for example, to say we are a Christian nation. Once you do that, then what has happened is that those who are not part of it, their liberty is intruded. You shouldn't just, majority. I think I read this from Professor Datiba's work, majoritarianism, basing things, when you have majoritarianism and people are using it, especially when there are no checks on that, that can be a problem. Now, religious liberty guarantees that each Ghanaian citizen may believe as he or she determines by the existence of God and the function of faith in their personal life. Freedom to practice religion, to practice one's religion, is a basic, indispensable characteristic of the individual liberty. Liberty in education. Here, I talk basically about the fact that who decides what should be taught? What books should students read? What books should be banned? We all know what happened when Nkrumah was overthrown. His books were banned. Some of them were burnt. That was wrong. You know, if you look at Guinean educational history, what you see that different governments have determined what they call it, answers to the above questions. The colonial government determined the nature and structure of our educational system. You know, some of the teachers that taught, you know, had 8th grade education, some had 10th grade education. Post-independence Ghana, I'm asking the same question. You know, now, one thing that I also found interesting is that in contemporary Ghana, you know, the tendency for the government has been to change how many years SHS or whatever should be. And even strange is the onomasiology involved in it. JSS, SSS to JHS, SHS. Maybe there's something magic about the word high. I don't know. I argue that in discussing Ghana's educational system issues such as who determines what is taught, how it is taught, anticipated outcomes must be liberty guided. You know, the linguistic rights of minorities should be taken into consideration. And, you know, I studied Akan at the A level. And, you know, it was kind of funny because there was a guy that when we were studying Akan and people were passing by, he would get up and close the doors, all the windows, and he said, we don't want them to know we are studying Akan, as if studying Akan was bad. And not just that, part of Akan was taught in English. Even though Professor Anokumi had written a book on, you know, all these things who could be taught in Akan, part was taught in English. So I remember, maybe I was troubled. I asked my Akan teacher, why are we teaching this in English? You teach some of it in English so that they know we are learning something. As if you learn something in English, it's better than if you learned it in your own language. You know, so anyway, and then some of the exams council, you know, examines part of it in English. I became a chief examiner, so I know what I'm talking. And first I quit being examiner for English, and then examiner for Akan. I wasn't happy. In fact, when we were asked to write a course textbook for Ghanaian language, you know, the Minister of Education access to, you know, a gentleman from UCC brought UCC course syllabus and said we should use that to write for JSS and SSS at the time. And I believe it was Ms. Vida Yaboa, who was the deputy minister. You know, so I raised my hand and said, Madam, I've tested this guy who brought this. He doesn't understand what is in the syllabus. And if we're, no, and he didn't. And so if we're going to write something that we don't know, then these kids are going to have problems. And then I remember her saying, oh, no, you write it. I said, no, I'm not. So I went and told Professor Dolphine, I said, I'm going to stop something. I want you to come with me to stop it. And she was generous. She went with me and I quit. It took, I don't know how many years for them to write it, but you know, here are some of the problems. You know, I mean, why should we write about vowel harmony and consonant mutation and when we ourselves are struggling to understand them? And we want A-level students. The same thing happened with oral English. We took tape recorders and went all over the place to test the students to speak like Brits when we were speaking like Ghanaians. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Recommendation, make liberty part of the social studies curriculum. I think this is very important. You know, liberty should be part of the social studies curriculum so that we can sensitize and conscientize the students about, you know, about liberty. Economic liberty, you know, here we're talking about fiscal liberty. People want to have the right to live well like humans. We want to earn a wage that is livable. If a government can't pay its people a livable wage, there's a problem. It's an intrusion on their fiscal liberty. Environmental liberty, I'm very passionate about this because in my hometown, everything is getting damaged. You know, everybody is digging gold for gold, you know, and nothing is left, basically. In fact, our own land is gone. And we're not given a penny. I wouldn't have taken the money because I would prefer the land being there. But yes, I mean, illegal mining, even all mining, I'm against it. You know, because it's a rubber industry. It takes millions of years, you know, for gold and diamond to develop. And so you take it out, and especially in the irresponsible way in which it is being taken out, it damages the environment. And we know the cardiovascular and hepatobiliary diseases that come with it. Here are some recommendations I make. Manage the land usage. Educate farmers about, what do you call it, how to use the land properly. In the 70s, they trained what they call the field assistants, who actually help the farmers. I remember when we studied agric science, they said if you plant corn, they should be 3 feet apart. It's a waste of land. In the US, it's 1 foot. So you can have more corn, on your land, so you don't have to slash and burn 10 acres. Society must find ways for liberty and the environment to coexist. This is very important. Violence and liberty. Here I'm talking about, when there are coup d'etats, wars, and how violence is used to intrude the liberty of people. Take what happened in Sierra Leone. The West Side Boys, they were cutting off people's arms. The DRC, King Leopold, of Belgium, chopping off hands of people. In Ghana, protests against unfulfilled promises by the British monarch led to the shooting death of soldiers. And we also know about what happens during coup d'etats, the use of sexual violence. In general, the loss of individual rights during war and pseudo wars is tantamount to the loss of their liberty. Who are the beneficiaries of liberty? You, me, all. Everybody benefits from it if we manage it well. Liberty is about persons and individuals. The two are different. Liberty is about persons and individuals, as well as the community. And so being first and foremost a cognitive experience, personal receptors and personal dealings, but also what a communal and social practice. Gaining of liberty and keeping it requires others to let go of their power. And exceptionalism, I'm almost done. Liberty is exceptionalism. We know liberty is exceptional. And this exceptionalism must be so recognized. An important part of human condition and being, liberty is unique because it is crucial to humans' ability to think and act as they wish. Liberty is vital. It's a vital source of and part of our human thought process and an act of tolerance that enables us to accept and deal with opposing views. Its exceptional nature makes it adapt to human experience and calls for unanimity and consensus building. Liberty's exceptionalism is built on the idea that one can change one's opinion. You can change our minds without fear of favor. I can support you today and oppose you tomorrow. That's what liberty is about. So what I've done in this lecture is basically to examine the concepts of language and liberty. I've argued that language and liberty are first and foremost cognitive experience. They are innate. We can add Pluto's word, they are intellected, and they are actualized in speech. They intertwine in human life and social practice. They index each other. They are important in such institutional domains as law, politics, religion, medicine, education, commerce, etc. And they are empowering. Language is empowering. Liberty is empowering. I argue that language indexes and is indexed by speakers' place of abode, profession, gender, political affiliation, and educational status. I identified and elucidated various types of liberty: legal, political, healthcare, ethics, religion, educational, social, fiscal, gender perceptions and construction, and environmental liberty. I discussed how and the extent to which violence impacts liberty, and I touched on who the beneficiaries of liberty are, and its exceptionalism. To have liberty, those in power must govern at the pleasure of the governed. To quote Sir Isaiah Berlin, freedom for the pike is death for the minnow. The liberty of some must depend on the restraint of others. Thank you very much.
Well, this is an absolutely brilliant, brilliant, brilliant lecture. Can we give him another round of applause? I'm not sure how long it took him to develop this, but if this is day one, then we all have to bring more people here for day 2 and day 3. This is stupendous, fantastic. Now, how can I, summarize this? So, so I have 3 take-home messages. So the speaker took us through the concept of language and liberty, and that language is empowering, liberty is empowering. There was an overview of what language is and what liberty is, the characteristics of language, and what was more important for me is the role of the brain in language. And we can see when the brain is affected by disease, we can't think, we can't talk, we can't walk. So the brain is quite central to the way we speak and our liberties, So we often don't tie in the physiological being and the language, but it's amazing God's creation, how the brain impacts on the way we talk and the way we think and our freedoms. And then he goes on to liberty. Had problems defining liberty. And the law and liberty, liberty and truth, and violence in liberty. And of course, all coups are bad. I mean, they define one's liberty. And then he went through beneficiaries of liberty. And another interesting aspect of the influence of politics and ethnicity on language, he gave examples of the Chinese, the Scandinavian, and how politics influence our language. Another interesting area was the idiolect, how individuals, play around, their personalities actually impact, how Nkrumah speaks the language, and even Rawlings' way of speaking, and current the British man, how he typically speaks the English now. So how politics can impact on how language is spoken and how it also interacts with the brain. And then a big area of the brain and the language. And that is subsumed in the frontal lobe, and how diseases of these areas impacts on our neurological faculties. And then went on to discuss Broca's aphasia, phonetically talking, and various other dysfunctional dysarthria, diseases of the brain that gets you to distortions of your speech. And then he went on to language and ideas. Language and ideas, how thinking, your mind, how we use language in our various activities. Language and social action, how you say yes, 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 I wouldn't begin to, do his dancing bit, but that was equally impactful as to the way we speak language and our social actions and its impact on the way we talk. And the impact of our professions, the law, the medicine, all these impact on our language and politics, And another interesting area I picked up was the xenoglossia, that is speaking a language that you haven't learned, and glossolalia, that is a non-human language. So this has been a huge learning experience certainly for me. And language of religious wars, language of medicine, and how different countries have impacted the, language and disease, like the role of the impact of Latin in disease, Greek, and even Ga, the Kwashiorkor, and the Senegalese, the Beriberi. So these are all impacts on the language. And then came to the health, language and health, the role of the shrines, the healing centers, the churches, the mosques. These are things that you never really ever thought of how they impacted on your, language. And another area, so a lot went on language and the professions, and then language and liberty. The Homo sapiens, we think we're so wise, we're liberal, we're born free, or full of problems. We're free from oppression, freedom to do as we choose, and the two important things, points he made, that is language is innate and liberty is also innate. And so humans are born with these. And when we're challenged, we tend to language. The language and the political processes. And then he went to law and liberty. Where law ends, I like this bit. Where law ends, tyranny begins. And that law must be appropriate, just, and in harmony. Then we go on to social liberty. Having social liberty demands having protection against liberty. And then the role of language in gender, liberty, liberty in health, liberty in ethics. And ultimately, he says that we should ensure that language is empowering. Language is also empowering. And with my little bit being put, I want us to thank the speaker for a tremendous. And we should all come back tomorrow for day 2 and day 3. Thank you, brother.
Right. So all too soon, come to the end of day 1 of the 58th JB Danquah lecture series. Let's thank our president for a wonderful summary of a wonderful lecture, and with the words that we aim to be here tomorrow to listen to the subsequent sequel of this wonderful lecture series. Thank you for the sponsors. We've mentioned their names at the beginning of the lecture, so just acknowledging the sponsorship. And my job here is to inform all of us that there will be refreshment in the foyer in front of the auditorium, especially for students. We hope that you get back quickly to campus and also safely. And for fellows and dignitaries, to inform all of us that there will be a refreshment in the fellows' lunch. So with this, I'd like to say thank you very much. And, have a good. Right. So the distinguished speaker and the president will and officials will be leaving, and I will kindly ask us respectfully that we'll keep up standing whilst. Thank you.